I will get started. So my name is Sue Atkins. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations here at Tufts. I've been here for 5 years. I work with a fabulous team of 3 of us. Sarah Breinbrecht, who's our new Assistant Director, just started with us about a month ago now, and Willa Mayo, Recruiting Coordinator, who works with all things Handshake and helping all of you to post your jobs and internships and reach our students. So both of them are with us today. So thank you both for joining, along with our Executive Director, Donna Esposito, who is here as well, who's joining as well. And I'm pleased to introduce our new Director for the Tufts International Center, Anna Garson. So I'll have her introduce herself to all of you.
Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Sue. My name is Anna Garson, and I am the new director of Tufts International Center. I have been here for only 3 weeks, so thrilled to be joining on this team. I support a team of international student and scholar advisors here in the International Center. We work with our students who are on visas, as well as some of our scholars here at Tufts with immigration compliance, helping them get work authorization. So very excited to share some of that information with you all as employers as you consider hiring some of our international students.
Great. So just a little bit about what we'll cover today. We'll talk a little bit about Tufts by the number. So what does our population look like? Why hire our international students? And then we'll go into F1, CPT and OPT, H-1B program, and then we have some kind of ways that you can connect with us and some resources and some Q&A. So if there are questions, like I said before, please feel free to put that in the chat for us. Let me move ahead. So Tufts by the numbers. So our Career Center, if I can say that properly, supports the schools of art, science, and engineering, which is roughly around 7,000 undergrads and about 2,200 graduate and PhD students across the 3 schools. In terms of our bachelor students, we have about 12% that are part of our international student population and 27% that are grad students that are international. They come from 96 different countries and 50 states across the US. 12% of our students are first generation. And we do have a FIRST Center on campus as well that supports that population. 47% students of color, and we do have a number of identity-based centers that support various populations on our campus as well, including an Africana Center, a Latinx Center, an Indigenous Center, LGBTQ Center, Women's Center. We have a STAR Center for students who are neurodiverse and have accessibility needs. So just a great variety of diverse population at our campus. And then from last year, we have 89% of our students complete at least 1 internship, and 68% of those do 2 or more internships. And that's coming from our Office of Institutional Research from 2023. So why hire international students? The international students come, as you could just tell from some of that data, come from diverse perspectives and really can add that lens to your organizational culture. So a great way to bring in new perspectives and ideas. Global and intercultural fluency and communication skills, and often they speak 2 languages or more, just depending on the region of the world they come from. So that often adds a great depth of intercultural competence and experience and communication to your teams. Experience in navigating new environments and ambiguity, since they come to the US and take classes in maybe a 3rd language and have to navigate our culture, which is very different from home cultures. They already know how to do that when they're entering your organization and bring that depth of skill and experience. And many of our international students come with STEM majors and degrees, which often enhance the technological competitiveness in your organization and often provide even more time and ability to work within your organization. And I know, Anna, you wanted to add some additional thoughts here.
Yes, yes. And this leads us into the next, session of our presentation. Why hire international students? Why not? Because as we're going to talk about shortly, contrary to popular belief, international students do not require sponsorship in the immediate in order to work in the United States. So that sort of leads us to the next portion of our presentation, which is about the different types of visas, including the student visas that our Tufts students are currently on, and the types of work authorizations they're eligible to apply for. So just before we get started, disclaimer, this is not legal advice. We're just going to be giving a general overview of these different visa types. If you have, your organization has questions about, other types of visas that require government applications, that would be something to ask a qualified attorney. But the F1 student visa, so this is the primary student visa in the US. There's other types of visas that students can come on, but the majority of our international students here at Tufts are on F1 visas in the United States. In general, the majority are on F1 visas. So while it is a student visa, there are different types of work authorizations that are a benefit of that student visa. And those are divided into two different categories. So you'll hear many different visa related, letters and acronyms today, but you can think, hopefully you can remember CPT and OPT, which are the two primary work benefits for F1 students. So the two categories are CPT, which is for internships related to students' degrees. So it's generally completed, or it has to be completed during their studies. So as you can see, it stands for Curricular Practical Training, meaning that it's a part of a student's program. It's integral to their degree, and we'll talk a little bit later on the next slide about what that means. And then OPT. So OPT can be used during or after studies. It's generally used after a student graduates, and that stands for Optional Practical Training because it's not a requirement of a program, but it is an option for students to apply for work authorization after they graduate.
Right. Oops, let me switch this forward. Sorry. There we go.
So a little bit more about CPT. So CPT, as I mentioned before, it is a part of a student study. So it's done during their studies, and it's a really great type of work authorization because it doesn't require a government application. So it's actually something that's approved by the International Center or the International Office at whatever university is sponsoring the F1 visa. And it's generally tied to a course, an internship course, a co-op, or some sort of required practicum or experiential education. So essentially, a student finds an opportunity that qualifies for this, and then they come to the International Center and get a authorization on their immigration document, their I-20, and then once they receive that, they're actually eligible to start working. So this can be full-time or part-time, depending on what the requirement, the academic requirement is for that internship. But again, it is completely done by the International Center, so there is no employer requirement in terms of filing applications or doing anything additional other than what you would do for a general employee of your company. When we talk about OPT, so OPT, as I mentioned, it can be used before students graduate, but generally is used after. So unlike CPT, OPT does require a little bit more forward thinking on the part of the student because it requires a government adjudicated application. So essentially, what happens is a student before they graduate, up to 3 months before they graduate, they can file a government request for OPT work authorization. They don't need to have a job offer in order to start this process. And then the government approves their work authorization, and pretty much all students are eligible for 1 year of this work authorization upon completing a program and otherwise maintaining their visa status. But then if students are in the STEM fields, which many Tufts students are, they can apply for an extension of that for up to for 2 additional years. So here we're talking about 3 years that an international student can work on a student visa without the need for sponsorship. That during that second and third year of OPT for STEM students, there are some employer requirements, but it's not related to the actual application itself. Their visa is still sponsored by Tufts. It's really the only requirement is working with that employee to come up with a training plan that relates what they are doing in their job to their actual role. So basically explaining how they're going to get some hands-on experience in what they studied. And then there's a few other requirements for STEM OPT. The employer that they decide to pursue their STEM OPT with does need to be enrolled in the E-Verify system. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're considering hiring international students. If you're not already enrolled in the E-Verify system, it's something you may want to consider because, again, if you have students working there for their regular OPT that want to continue through their STEM OPT, they do have this requirement. So just at the top, fun fact of how many international students were on OPT in the US last academic year. So there are many, many students in the US pursuing OPT. So really great for our job market and for all of those benefits that Sue mentioned earlier for hiring international students.
Anna, quick question. When we're talking about internships, can we also say co-ops interchangeably? Because the student will be
Yes.
working full-time with an employer, typically for 6 months.
Yes. So it doesn't matter what the experience is called from an academic perspective. It could be an internship, a co-op, a practicum. The only thing I'll say that I forgot to mention previously about CPT is that it is offered on a semesterly basis. So generally students are limited to, within the semester dates. There are some ways, when there are longer arrangements that, we work to provide multiple CPT authorizations, but generally it's tied to the semester. Does that answer your question, Sue?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you may be thinking this is all great. We've hired an international student for 1 year or 3 years after they graduate. What next? So after OPT, so after they're done with their 1 or 3 years, they are going to require some additional type of sponsorship, which requires more employer involvement. So the H-1B is one of the primary work visas in the US. It's a non-immigrant visa, so it's not meant for permanency that allows folks to work in the United States for a sponsoring employer. So it was designed specifically for workers in specialty occupations that require a minimum of a bachelor's degree in a specialized field or discipline. So Most of the time, the H-1B, unless you are a specific type of nonprofit employer, the H-1B is subject to a lottery system. So there's a pre-registration process that happens in February, March, and then a certain number of the pre-registrants are selected to submit their application. And this is because there's a cap, so there's a maximum number of these available in the US. So there are 65,000 in general for everyone, and then there's an additional 20,000 for folks with master's degrees. So it is subject to a lottery system. It does require fees, several $1,000s on the part of the employer, which I can argue is it's a commitment, but little compared to what that employee may be able to offer to your organization. And we'll go over some facts, also some facts and myths about the H-1B visa on the next slide. But a note that, oops, if you wouldn't mind going back for me, Sue,
Sure.
for just 1 minute.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the transition from OPT to H-1B, it actually can be fairly seamless. So essentially, when a student is on OPT and their employer submits an application that's selected in this lottery, if they are approved for that H-1B, then they can actually continue working until that H-1B start date, which is generally October 1st. So their OPT can be extended in that in-between time. So that is great for an employer because there wouldn't be any gaps in the employment authorization for your employee. So facts and myths. So fact, as I mentioned, it does require an employer to sponsor the employee, and it does require a specialty occupation. And this is defined as a job that requires specialized skills, requiring at least a bachelor's degree as a condition for entry in the position. So it does have certain wage requirements that can vary by job type and job location. So generally on the student visa side for those benefits, there aren't that many requirements related to compensation. For the H-1B, there are. So essentially the employer has to determine or has to look into the prevailing wage. So generally what an employee in this field is making in that specific region, and then what is being actually offered to the employee or the employees who are working in at your company in this job, and then must agree to pay the greater of the two. So that's a process that's called, a labor conditions application that has to be filed with the government before being able to actually sponsor for the H-1B. So the H-1B provides up to 3 years of work authorization that can be extended up to a maximum of 6 years. There are some extensions beyond the 6 years if that employee is being sponsored for a green card. It can also be restarted, so an employee can work for an organization for 6 years, assuming they're not sponsored for a green card. They can spend 12 months at home, and then they can come back and it restarts the 6-year clock for them. A common myth also is that employers must show that there were no qualified U.S. workers. So this is not the case for the H-1B. So as I mentioned, there is a process through which you have to determine the appropriate wage and have to agree to pay that wage to the employee, but there's no process through which you have to post the position and demonstrate there's no U.S. workers. The other myth is that you can't fire an H-1B once they are hired. That's not the case. You can terminate, and there's still protections for that H-1B employee. There are also some rules that you have to follow as an employer if you were to fire an H-1B employee.
Mhm.
So there's also other options, other visa-related options that may be that a student after they've transitioned from OPT may be eligible for. So there is the TN professional visa for citizens of Canada or Mexico. So the TN provides temporary employment for citizens of either of these two countries. There's no maximum stay, but it is issued for periods of 3 years. And it's actually a great option because it doesn't require any application to the US government. So essentially, the applicant has to have an offer from a US employer in a field that has been specifically specified by NAFTA. And then they receive a letter of support from their employer, and they're actually able to apply for this at the port of entry. There's also the E3 free trade agreement visa for Australian citizens. If your employee happens to be Australian, it's still temporary employment in a specialty occupation. And then there's the H-1B one, not to be confused with the H-1B, but similar. So this is a free trade agreement visa for Chile and Singapore. So it has a lot of the same requirements as the H-1B, but there are additional visas available for citizens of these countries, which is good news for them since there is that cap each year, that lottery. And then there's the J1 exchange visitor visa, which can be used for temporary interns, trainees, teachers, and visiting professors. So we actually have J1 visa holders here at Tufts as well, who also have types of work authorization that we haven't gone over today, but it is another option for work authorization.
Great. And I just wanted to share some resources with all of you. I'll be sending you this PowerPoint just for your own awareness after this, so you'll get a copy. But Envoy offers a free employer's guide to the H-1B. So there's a link here. And we have a partnership with Interstride here at Tufts. And so they have a number of free resources for employers. They have workshops on a variety of topics I just looked up today, and they have a number for higher ed institutions as well. And they also work with employers to help promote your jobs and internships and co-op. So I just, encourage you to check that out. And then we included some additional resources around international students and USCIS. And I think the International Student Center has a great section on employers as well. So if you need a refresher of some of this information, there's some great information for employers on the International Student website as well. And then kind of partnering with the Career Center, we hope that all of you will work with us and our team. We are hosting a career fair on September 27th from 11:30 to 3:30 here on campus if you're able to join us. In addition, we have a bunch of networking nights. Those are held throughout the academic year with various themes, including design networking night, sustainability networking night, public service and social impact. And so we invite employers to join us for those events to share information about your industry, career pathways, opportunities if you have them, although that is not a requirement to join us. It's just a great way for our students to get experience networking and hearing kind of the state of the field or industry sector. We also encourage you to offer a workshop or an information session around a topic like building your brand, because students will really engage with those types of sessions more than just a general information session. So you can work with myself, Sarah Reinbrecht or Willa Mayo to reach out about those. And we do offer a monthly newsletter for employers. So if you're interested in being added to that, please just send me a quick note and we will add you to the employer newsletter that goes out each month. And lastly, we have on campus or virtual interviews that you can conduct if you have specific positions you're hiring for. We're happy to work with you to set those up to come to campus or to offer them through your virtual platform as well. And questions. We're happy to take any questions that you have. I'll stop sharing the PowerPoint and see what questions folks might have for us. So feel free if you want to put in the chat, if you're not shy and want to come off of, your screen and ask it personally, however is best for you. So please let us know what questions you have. Anything at all is welcome. Don't be shy.
Hi, Susan. This is Jessica
Yes.
Bodwin from the city of Boston. How are
Oh,
you?
great. Thanks for joining us. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us. One question I had around a challenge that we saw this year with some of our summer interns who were international students is the process of getting their EAD card and the social security number if this is their first time working in the United States. Could you, if anyone on the call has a little bit of clarity around the timeline or a resource that you could point us to that can help us better plan for our process and how we can, potentially accelerate that to ensure that they have a sufficient amount of time to, get all of that documentation?
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Anna?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share. So we always encourage our students, one of the benefits of them doing CPT, so internships prior, or even just on-campus employment, is the fact that they can get a social security number. And of course, that number doesn't change throughout, that student's life. So then they're ready, when they apply for OPT, they already have their social security number. They're just waiting on their EAD card. There have been periods and times when the Social Security Administration, unfortunately, has had delays in issuing cards. Right now, the standard processing time should really only be 2 weeks. But again, there's been periods of times when it's been much longer. So there's two ways for students who are on OPT to apply for a social security number if they don't have one already. So one way is through the application for OPT itself. So when they're applying for that EAD card, there's a checkbox that actually it automatically sends the request to the Social Security Administration, and they should get that Social Security card within 2 weeks of receiving their EAD card. The other option is to wait to actually receive the EAD card and then go to the Social Security office. We would recommend the first option. Generally during most times of the year, it works pretty well. Students receive their Social Security number without problem. I know that with the benefit of going to the Social Security Administration after you receive the card is that you get the receipt for it. And I know different employers have different policies about, allowing folks to work with the receipt of the Social Security number. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't control the Social Security Administration, but I think, the student having clarity about which option they are planning to do or have already done, they can get a better estimate of when they can plan to begin work.
Jessica, I had a question. Is it high school students or college or both?
Typically college
Okay.
for the summer internship.
Okay, that's helpful.
So the summer, so there's a couple of things. So if I'm hearing internship, but it sounds like you mentioned EAD card. So I was referencing OPT, so that application that goes through the U.S. government. But if you have and again, a student on OPT can be hired for an internship position, and that's not a problem. It still works for their OPT. But if that student is still an active student and is able to get CPT, which is that much quicker process that's authorized by our office, they're able, once they have the I-20 with the CPT authorization and their job offer letter, they should be able to go right to the Social Security office and request it. So that can be done before the internship starts. So sometimes it can become a problem if students are like gone when they receive the offer, not in the United States, because they have to be here to apply. So I would just, in that case, it would be be, you know, encouraging the employee to come back before so they can get all of their paperwork straightened out before their actual start date.
Got it. Great. That clarification was helpful. Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.
A question came in about, can students start before they get their social security number? Is that correct? And that will hold up them getting paid, is the question.
So I'm not going to, basically a social security number is different from work authorization. I think that's what I'll say. So what authorizes a student to work is either the I-20 with CPT authorization in the case of CPT, or the EAD card in the case of OPT.
They need to have that, basically.
Yeah.
essentially.
So that's what's authorizing them to work. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure I was clear. Yeah. Any other questions that folks have? Again, don't be shy. It's always a very complex land to navigate, and certainly, and actually when I worked at another institution, we used to take our college students to the Social Security office in a group trip all at once, so that we could be there if there were questions or things that came up. So we used to do that at one of our schools in the past. Yes, Lynn.
Hi, Sue. I have a question. We actually have an international student. We hire an international graduate from Tufts, and we actually sponsor the H-1B for him, and he actually got selected after the petition. After the lottery, and we had our lawyer help submit the petition. So I just want to understand, because I'm from the HR team in Paris, so I'm not so sure, like, does this like kind of guarantee that he's gonna get the H-1B visa at this stage where he already got past the lottery and we already submit the petition? I know, of course, that it's not like 100%, but is it like we can say that it's pretty much like sure?
Yeah, so I will answer in general. If you're selected in the lottery, it still goes through the full approval process. So it does not, being selected does not guarantee approval. So that is where it's really important to be communicating with it sounds like an attorney has helped file the petition. And they generally, what happens, in most cases, a petition will not be flat out denied. It will, if the government has further requests, they can send what's called an RFE, a request for evidence, or an RFI, request for information, to the employer, the attorney that's representing the employers, to gather more information. So it does not, in the ideal scenario, it leads to approval, but it's not a guarantee by any means.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Anna, for leading the charge. Whoops, there was oh yeah.
Oh, that was me.
That was you. I was like, that's her. Thank you for leading the charge and sharing this great information with all of us today. And like I had mentioned earlier, I'll send out the PowerPoint information to everyone, and we'll send out the recording next week. But thank you again for everyone attending. And if you want to connect with Tufts and join us for some of our events this year, we would welcome that and look forward to hearing from you. Have a great rest of your summer and look forward to seeing you at Tufts this fall. So thanks again and have a great day. Bye-bye.